Hi, we are Walt and Mary Ann McCormac. We live at 309 South Bayview Drive. We purchased our house in 1975 from Mrs. McCluskey, who was related to Jake Gruser, who lived across the street next to Twisties. When we moved here, there were high weeds around the old water tower. The water tower had no top. The seagulls landed on it, and eventually when it went bankrupt, I guess, we had to go down to Sea Isle, First Street, to get water from a tank truck for drinking. We could still shower and all with the water from here. So the railroad ran across from Twisties, which may have been a railroad station at one time, and came across and behind our property and down past Dick Shetler. So
The water company has that property now, right? That
the
lot.
water company was eventually purchased by American Water, and they put in a new tank, a bigger one, in a slightly different place, and pretty much got rid of all of the weeds and put grass in. So that helped with a lot of our favorite friends, the mosquitoes and green flies. Mary Ann may have a couple comments now.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Grabby property that is where Dave Townsend's house is now. Mr. and Mrs. Grabby had a few little houses there that they rented out, and Mr. Grabby would go fishing every day and crabbing, and he would sell his crabs and his flounder that he caught. He would catch the flounder, he would clean it, and he would put them in ice cube trays, fill them with water, freeze them, and sell them for $2 a tray. And everybody on the island wanted to buy Mr. Grabby's flounder. And now Dave Townsend's house is their big house.
Now, what about the produce truck that used to come
yeah.
when we were little?
When our children were little, there used to be a truck, the produce truck would come, and it would come into Strathmere and stop in front of Jake Gruser's house, which is right next to Twisties, and all the neighbors would come out and we could buy our fresh produce from him, but he doesn't come anymore. But I do see his truck around in Sea Isle a little bit. And when our children were little, for some reason, we had 2 or 3 gullies on the beach. And it was really great for the moms because we could take our beach chairs down and sit at the gully while our children played in the gully. We didn't have to stand up and watch them, in the waves or anything. So that was kind of neat.
Kind of like a big pool along the jetty that went out, which is no longer there, right?
There was a jetty.
Yeah, that went all the way straight out.
Because you fell on those.
Yeah, there was a rock jetty that went out off the
Right.
beach. It's now buried. Another point I remember,
Up against the,
yeah, is our daughter Megan and Jennifer worked at the Old Time Store, which is on the corner of Tecumseh and the main street. And Richard had that, don't recall his last name. Ingram. And of course, he eventually wanted to sell it and go west. So the girls came home and said, Richard wants you to buy the store. And I thought, that's a good idea. Who's going to pick up the rolls of papers at 4 or 5 in the morning? I know they would do it, but
Of course.
that was a bad deal.
Right. But when our children were growing up, our daughter's name is Jennifer, of course, and there were five other Jennifers in town here. There was Jennifer Rutherford Hahn, who lives across the street from us, Jennifer Detweiler, who lived on Webster, I believe, Jennifer Eisenhart Cummings, who is the niece to Donna Diffenderfer.
Right.
Yeah, right on the corner. And Jennifer Ingram Walsh. and Jennifer Fader, whose parents are Lynn and Lynn and Henry Fader, right?
Yeah.
And all those girls were around when our children were growing up, and it was kind of neat because they would all come over to the house and visit, and they would all go together to the beach, and they still do that now. They come themselves, and then they come also with their families and also with their children, which is really nice to see. They all kind of congregate together.
How about some of the other stores or places in town, like Ernie's or Vans or the Beach Cafe? Remember?
Where La Fontana is now used to be Ernie's, and Ernie had a little deli there and a little counter, and you could buy soup and I guess sandwiches there, and he also had a gas station outside, so you could get gas there. And then after that, I believe I believe it became Vans, and our daughter Megan worked there, and also Keith Cordry worked there. And then it became the Beach Cafe, and
So I watched their children.
and Jennifer watched their two little girls, Revan and Lachlan, who were adorable and who now are probably about 35
Probably.
years old.
How about Dad? You talked about the cast from the Cats.
Yeah, we had
show?
a friend. Yeah, we had a friend in Avalon who asked us if we knew of anything for rent here along the water, and we remembered Mrs. Cotton had a place over on the water, and it turned out, we didn't know it, that was the cast from the show Cats. All came here. I think the original producer and people were from Philadelphia. But anyway, they came and stayed for a long weekend over on the water. And that was a surprise to meet all of them.
Yeah, they loved it here, actually. They were from New York and they absolutely loved it here. But unfortunately, that Mrs. Cotton's house burnt down, and the fire then spread to the Weaver's house next door. But they were able to rebuild, so Mrs. Cotton's house was bought by the Krugers, I think, Dr. Kruger? Kruger. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it recently sold about, 5 years ago or so.
Our street floods often. We're used to it. Comes in our yard sometimes. And of course the kids loved it with the rowboat coming down the street in the yard. And
Now the grandkids like it.
some people who visited us got quite nervous when the water would come in on high tide. It actually is much better now since they put the drains in at different places along the bay. Well,
Now speaking of the streets flooding and some of the storms that you remember, I guess the
Yeah.
biggest one being Sandy.
the worst storm we had was Sandy. We probably had 2 feet of water in our house here.
And that was
So-
in what year?
That was in 2012, and we actually were in Florida at that time. And we got a phone call saying that, there was a whole lot of water in the street. And so I called Ken and Jessica Weaver, and they said they would walk around the house to see if they felt that any water had gotten inside. And so she called me and she said, no, I think your house was spared. So we said, oh, well, that's good, but would you mind just, seeing if you can go inside? And told her where the key was and just look around a little bit. So she did that, and she called me back and she said, uh-oh, your refrigerator that used to be against the wall is now across the room against the stove. So we actually had about 2 or 2.5 feet of water inside. And Walt and I and the girls and my brother Frank and his wife Donna and our nephew Jimmy actually took all the walls out, 2.5, 3 feet high, and redid the whole place. We had to throw everything out. We kept this kitchen table, because this was okay. But all the bedding, all the furniture, the living room furniture, everything had to go in the trash. And that was
I
that was
remember,
difficult.
I remember a typical Strathmere good deed was, while we were trying to throw everything out from the house after the storm, a couple of young girls, probably teenagers, came along and volunteered like an hour or 2 hours of their time to help people, including us, clear things out of the house. And of course they had dumpsters, and they had a bulldozer going up and down the street to try and take as much debris away so that they wouldn't have any more high water and have a bigger problem. So that's another memory.
Do you want to share about Sue Doberstein's mom, Nan, who told you about it?
Our friend Sue Doberstein, her original name was Johnson. She lived here,
She's Kent Weaver's cousin.
Kent Weaver's cousin, and she talked about the storm in 1944, which probably Ken may have had some information on. But I remember her, she said that was the worst storm that she ever experienced. And she remembers the postman going from telephone pole to telephone pole trying to get back to Sea Isle, and she took him in a window of her house at that time. And she also said that down around 10th, 11th Street in Sea Isle, it was a break point in the water coming across the road, and she thought eventually there'd be another inlet there or a breakthrough. That hasn't happened, but that area was flooding pretty quickly before the dunes.
Yeah, that was interesting. You want to talk a little bit about the cats at the Deauville?
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, I was working on the house the first year we bought it, and I thought, gee, I'll go up to Deauville and get a 6-pack of beer. So I went up, I was probably in my 40s. I went up, tapped on the door. There were people in there drinking, and a lady came to the door and she said, "We're closed." I said, "Well, everybody's in there." She said, "Well, how old are you?" And I told her I was, whatever I was, 40. She said, "You have to be 50 to come in here." She had all kinds of cats in there, and the locals, I guess. But that was a strange experience.
And how about, how the Deauville has changed and, Twisties or places in town?
Twisties was closed when we came here. I don't think until, I don't know what year they brought the license from wherever it was and reopened it, but that caused some problems around town. So some of us weren't keen on it reopening, but I remember that time I got a phone call from a cousin saying that she told us that the place had reopened and there were, a number of people over there.
So, maybe talk a little bit about just the town in general and, like, what kind of feel you think it might have as far as, Megan and I have talked about how there's just a bond among people and how, you walk down the street and the neighbors and, maybe talk a little bit about that special, how it's such a special place.
Well, as far as the town goes now, Mary Ann may have some comments on it, but my thought is that, with the high taxes and the cost of the homes, the families, most of them are not here. And that's a change in, they always had some families that stayed here on the island. I don't know what the future holds, but it was interesting in the mid-70s, a lot of the homes along the water north of Twisties were empty or abandoned. I remember a roofer lived in one of the houses, and he died, and the house was there with the door open for a long time. So it's funny how everything has redeveloped since that time.
But a lot of old timers are still here, like us, and we know, everybody on the way to the beach, and everybody down on Bayview, and all our children's parents, and
Actually, we're new in town. We're only here 40 or 50 years, I guess.
yeah, right. Because a lot of our children's friends' parents are still here, and now they're all grandparents like we are. So that's kind of neat to see everybody, and they come by and they visit, and we know everybody on the way down to the boat ramp, and then up to Twisties, and up to the Deauville, and down toward the beach. Yeah.
So listen, we'll see you down the beach if you can get a parking spot.
Do you want to tell them about Walmart? Stop by Walmart?
Oh yeah, stop by Walmart. I'm Walt from Walmart. In fact, I went over to the neighbor because we were having a local party, and when I went around the back to say hello, I introduced myself to the neighbor across the street. He said, "You must be Walt from Walmart." So the word's out.
So come by, they're open every day.
That's right. Our prices are right.
That's right.
Yeah. You need nuts, screws, bolts? Stop on by.
Yeah. Well, we love it here, and we're sorry to see it, changing like it is, but it just has a special quality. And as soon as you come over the bridge, you think, "Oh, I'm home." It's a great feeling. One last question before we go, and that is, where the hell is Strathmere? Shh.